The Yoon Suk-yeol administration announced a comprehensive tax reform last week, touting the changes as key stimulus points to not only increase corporate investment, but also to bring much-needed relief for everyday citizenry as the entire world battles high inflation and a looming recession on the horizon. To take a deep look underneath the hood of these tax reforms and to give us an honest review of the new tax code, Professor Yang Joon-seok joins us now on the line. Good morning, Professor Yang.
Good morning.
So, Professor Yang, give us a little rundown on the overall tax reform plan that the Yoon administration announced last week.
Okay, I thought it could have been better thought out, especially where it concerns the category, the amount, the upper bound and lower bound amount where it concerns inflation. It doesn't change right now with inflation for corporate tax or income tax. So if there's a high inflation, continuous high inflation, you might actually pay more taxes, not less.
Mm-hmm.
And currently, especially for corporate taxes, it's only the largest, the firms with the highest adjusted earnings and some small and medium-sized enterprises which gets a tax break. So for most firms, it may not actually do very much.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it could have been somewhat better thought out.
Okay, so you mentioned the corporate tax. So let's look at it, categorically. What are some of the big changes in the corporate tax in terms of the numbers?
Okay, well, the Korea's top corporate tax rate was 25%, but that category was eliminated.
Mm-hmm.
There were a total of 4 tax rate categories in corporate taxes, and the 25% tax was eliminated. So companies which were paying 25% now only pay 22%, the next highest category. There had been many complaints by the business sector that Korea had top corporate tax rates which are too high compared to most OECD countries. The average OECD top corporate rate was 21.5%. So this reduction in the top corporate rate would bring Korea's top rate closer to the OECD average.
Mm-hmm.
But also, we should note that right now, United States and European Union have agreed on a global minimum corporate tax rate of 15%. That's the top rate, while the Korean rate is much higher than 15%. So we don't have any problem with that particular agreement. Some OECD countries, such as Ireland, are in the process of raising their top corporate rate to be in conformance with that treaty. So the biggest firms, the firms with the highest adjusted earnings, will be paying less taxes. Meanwhile, the lowest corporate tax rate for Korea is 10% for firms whose adjusted earnings are less than 200 million won. But the firms eligible for that lowest rate have been expanded. Small and medium-sized enterprises, and I should emphasize that this is for small and medium-sized enterprises only,
Mm-hmm.
whose adjusted earnings are below 500 million won, are now eligible for that lowest tax rate of 10%. So there's tax cuts for the firms with the highest adjusted earnings. There are tax cuts for firms between 200 to 500 million won adjusted earnings. But for the rest of the companies, you don't have a tax cut. In fact, there's not that much of a change in terms of how much you have to pay and the tax rate categories.
Mm-hmm.
So for those firms, effectively nothing really has changed. So I'm not sure if for most firms they will have a tax cut, and whether those firms will have an incentive to increase investment, which is what this tax cut was designed to do in the first place. But as I said, the current structure seems to be very vulnerable to inflation. What a lot of other countries do is if there's inflation, then the categories, the upper and lower bounds for the tax rate increase with the inflation. So if you had, say, 1% inflation this year, and the upper bound was 500 million won. Then next year, that upper bound would be increased to 505 million won. So in terms of purchasing value, the amount of taxes you would pay would not change that much.
Right.
But Korea does not have that type of structure, and we're facing a very high inflation this year. So next year, when you're paying taxes, you might get lucky and you're in a category which gets a tax break, but your adjusted earnings may go up because of inflation, and so you may end up paying more taxes, or your tax cut that you expected in terms of purchasing power may not be as much as you expected. So a better strategy would have been to install a upper and lower bound for taxes that floats with the inflation rate.
Right. And one of the things that they were touting was by lowering corporate taxes, the Yoon administration was saying that it was incentivizing all these large corporations and companies to invest more into their people and into their businesses. But you briefly mentioned that you don't think that this is going to happen, right?
Right, because a lot of companies are just not getting a tax cut, at least according to the charts that the government has released. And then second reason is that, well, a lot of companies in the OECD countries had reduced corporate tax rate in 2015 to 2020. A lot of countries, they were engaged in sort of a race for lower corporate tax rate. So they did cut tax rates, but didn't really increase investment in the short run. Taking the United States tax cut in 2017, for example, a lot of companies used those tax cuts not for additional investment or expanding their operations, but buying back stocks so they can keep their stock prices up. What seems to be happening and what the macroeconomic consensus seems to be is that you don't have investment merely because of tax cuts. You need increase in demand, whether it's local demand or global demand, for companies to invest more because, well, it's somewhat obvious, but companies do not want to invest and expand their operations unless they're sure that they can sell the stuff that they're going to make. So we're going to have to wait until demand picks up again, and if we have a lower tax rate, then perhaps they will invest somewhat more than they would have in the first place. So what we need first is an increase in demand, and then this cut in corporate taxes may kick in, but this cut in corporate taxes by itself is not likely to increase investment by all that much. But over the long run, you may be able to get the effect from the tax cut, but you need that increase in demand first.
Right, increase in demand and also for recovery. Let's skip over to income taxes. Only the people in the lowest two categories, 6% and the 15% income tax rates, are affected. So roughly, how many people will be helped by the changes?
Well, even though the adjusted earnings, the people who get a tax break are people who are earning adjusted earnings up to 50 million won. The people have been doing a lot of calculations. The analysts have been doing a lot of calculations, and it seems like people who earn before they adjust their earnings, so their gross income before calculating all these exemptions and deductions, if you make about 120 million won per year, then you should be able to get some kind of a tax break. And people who are in the sweet spot, people who get the largest amount of tax breaks, are people who earn about 100 million won per year before adjusting. Now, government consciously designed this tax so that if you earn more than 120 million won per year unadjusted income, then some of the exemptions and deductions come down, so that sweet spot where you have the most tax cut is about when you're earning about 100 million won per year. And there has been a lot of criticism. Well, if you're earning 100 million won per year, you're actually doing very, very well. You may be considered a middle income, but very, very upper middle income. How about the poor? How about the lower income? Well, they don't get as much of a tax break. They don't. The amount of the taxes that they save are not really very high, and that is because, well, a lot of people in the lowest income tier already they don't pay that much taxes. The lowest income tier is about 6%, but a lot of people, because they have the exemptions and deductions for the lowest income households, they currently do not pay income taxes, so they can't really get anything. They can't get a tax cut. And then similarly for a lot of lower middle class households, because they pay so little in taxes, there's not that much that they can get back. So there is some there is some fair criticism to be made that perhaps this particular tax reform favors the rich, both corporate taxes and income taxes. But on the side of income taxes, I think that's just because people who pay less taxes have less to get back.
Right. Okay, well, let's finally jump over to the real estate tax category. In terms of the actual revision and how the tax is assessed, comprehensive real estate tax system was changed the most. So what are the big changes here? This has been drawing a lot of interest from people because of the rise in housing prices that you saw in the last couple of years.
Right. Korea pays property taxes in 3 installments. Well, the formal property tax is you have to pay it in July and September, and then there's the comprehensive real estate tax in December. Now, for regular component of the property tax, originally you were supposed to have an assessed value for the housing. That's what your taxes are based on, and this assessment value was supposed to go up each year to approach the market value. Well, because the market value went up so much in the last couple of years, they've slowed down that assessment price increases. So at least according to the government material, your property tax should go back to the level that you paid during the pre-pandemic. And then there's the comprehensive real estate tax, which was originally only supposed to apply for people who had the most expensive housing and people who had multiple units of housing. Mm-hmm. That changed quite considerably, and now I think we should really think about what you want the comprehensive real estate tax to do, because original purpose seems to be lost. What I mean by that is the original comprehensive real estate tax was meant to have punitive measures for people who own housing in the very expensive housing in the very speculative areas, like some areas in Seoul or some areas in metropolitan cities outside Seoul. And there was also supposed to have punitive measures on people who own multiple units of housing, because the previous government thought that was absorbing all houses, all apartments, so that the normal middle-class people could not afford to buy housing anymore. But now they changed it so that there's no punitive measures for purchasing a house in a speculative zone. There's no punitive measures for owning multiple units of housing. It's just now based on no matter how many units that you own, total value of the housing units you own. So it basically becomes an addition, appendix to the current existing property tax. So what is it there for? Is it to get for government to get more income, which is the original primary purpose of the property tax? It really doesn't serve much as a punitive measure anymore. Does that mean that we need comprehensive income tax, comprehensive real estate tax anymore? We don't really. All these so-called policy purposes for the tax seem to have disappeared. So in that case, why do we need this comprehensive real estate tax? And that might be the government's intention, because President Yoon during the campaign has expressed that he wants the comprehensive real estate tax to be consolidated with property tax. And this might be just their middle step, intermediate step of doing that. But still, it's not entirely clear what the comprehensive real estate tax is for anymore.
Right. And finally, with these tax cuts, how is it going to affect the deficit and also Korea's debt?
Okay, well, the government claims that the reduction in tax receipts will only be 13.1 trillion won between 2023 and 2026. Given the past record of government's estimation on future taxes, I'm not sure if it'll be that high. I'm also not sure that tax receipts are going to be reduction in tax receipts are going to be less than 13 trillion won because of inflation, as I said before. Mm-hmm. If you have inflation, so your income goes up, monetary income goes up because of inflation, you pay more taxes, both income taxes and corporate taxes, even though in terms of purchasing power, your wages might not have gone up. But still, because your monetary nominal income or earnings have gone up, you'll probably pay more taxes. So I'm not sure whether government's estimate of 13.1 trillion won between 2023 and 2026 will be correct. But still, if we take the government numbers, then if we look at 2023 and 2024 specifically, tax receipts will fall by 6.4 trillion won next year and 7.3 trillion won in 2024. Given that the government's total tax receipts are now more than 400 trillion won, this 6 and 7 trillion won per year is going to be a drop in the bucket. So the government should be able to afford this type of tax receipts, but it will do very little to reduce Korea's government deficits and Korea's debt to GDP ratio. That will require reduction in spending, which is Yoon administration's next step.
Okay. Well, Professor, thank you so much for the wrap-up on the tax changes here in Korea, and have a great day.
Thank you.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.